I told him, "Provide for me, or I'm leaving." He smirked and packed his bags immediately. "Hello, Reddit. My name is Amanda, and I am 28 years old. Until recently, I was married to my husband, Jordan, 32 male, for 5 years. And for all those years, I never lifted a finger to work. I never had to, and I never wanted to. It wasn't because I was incapable or because I lacked the qualifications. I just always hated the idea of working. The stress, the pressure, the exhaustion that came with having to clock in and out every single day for a paycheck that might not even be enough to enjoy life? No, thank you. That was never for me. I wanted a soft life, one where I could wake up at any time, sip coffee on a beautiful patio, and plan my days around brunches, spa appointments, and shopping sprees. A life where my biggest worry was choosing between a designer bag or a last-minute vacation to some tropical paradise. And I was lucky enough to find a man who not only agreed with my dreams, but was willing to make them happen for me. From the moment I met Jordan, I knew he was different. He was stable, confident, and ambitious. He owned a logistics business that was growing fast, making him more money than he even knew what to do with. He had that kind of quiet wealth that didn't need to be flaunted to be known. The type that made me feel safe, like I would never have to worry about bills, rent, or God forbid, getting a job. Jordan had always been traditional in the way men like him often are. He didn't want a wife who was constantly stressed, running around with meetings and deadlines, barely having time to take care of the home or even enjoy life. He believed men should provide and women should have the choice to stay home and live comfortably. And of course, I agreed. Why wouldn't I? Before we got married, I made it very clear that I had no interest in being the kind of woman who woke up at 6 a.m. just to sit in traffic and then get yelled at by some boss all day. I wanted to be a wife, not a worker. Jordan had smiled at that and told me that he would always provide. He said he worked hard so that his wife would never have to lift a finger unless she wanted to. Those words made me fall for him even harder. So when we got married, I did exactly what I had always wanted. I enjoyed my life. Mornings were slow and peaceful. I would wake up at my own time, scroll through my phone for an hour or two, check my social media, maybe reply to a few messages from friends before finally dragging myself out of bed. I didn't have to rush anywhere. There was no alarm, no schedule, no boss breathing down my neck. While Jordan got up early, threw on his suit, and headed out to run his company, I took my time making myself a light breakfast, a smoothie, or sometimes just coffee. Then I would decide what I felt like doing that day. Some days, it was brunch with my friends, where we would sit at fancy cafes sipping overpriced lattes and laughing about how hard some women made life for themselves by choosing to work. I could never be that woman. Some afternoons, I went shopping, and I loved that I never had to check price tags. If I liked something, I bought it. Simple as that. Luxury wasn't just a dream for me, it was my reality. Other days I would go to the spa, the salon, or just relax at home, maybe binge watch a show or scroll endlessly through Instagram, admiring the lives of women who, like me, had men who spoiled them. I never had to ask Jordan for money. He had given me access to his accounts, and I could spend as I pleased. If I ever needed cash, he would send it without hesitation. He never asked what I did all day, never questioned my expenses, and never made me feel guilty for enjoying the life he worked for. That's what a good husband was supposed to do, right? Make his wife happy? We lived in a beautiful home, a place I had carefully decorated to match the vision of my dream life. It had high ceilings, large windows, and furniture that cost more than what most people made in a year. It was my palace, and I felt like a queen. We also had a great car, or rather, Jordan had one, since I never really learned to drive. I didn't need to. Whenever I had somewhere important to go, I used Uber or had one of my friends pick me up. Driving seemed like a hassle anyway. To be honest, I never really knew much about Jordan's business. I just knew he worked in the textile industry, and I knew it was successful, and I knew it made enough money to give me the lifestyle I wanted, and that was all that mattered. If he was tired when he came home, I would listen to him talk about his stressful day while I half paid attention, waiting for him to finish so I could tell him about a new bag I wanted or a vacation we should take. I wasn't a bad wife. I made sure the house was clean, even if it was our maid who actually did the cleaning. I made sure Jordan had food, even if it was just ordering takeout when I didn't feel like cooking. I made sure he was happy, or at least I thought I did. For years, this was my perfect life, and I couldn't understand why other women chose to struggle. I looked down on those who worked tirelessly, juggling careers and home life, exhausted and drained while their husbands barely appreciated them. What was the point? I had everything I wanted. A husband who provided a luxurious lifestyle and freedom to do whatever I pleased. I never thought it would end. I never imagined that one day everything would come crashing down so fast I wouldn't even see it coming. But it did. And it all started the moment Jordan's business began to fall apart. I don't remember exactly when things started to change. Maybe it was gradual, maybe it happened all at once. But what I do remember is that one day, the money just wasn't there anymore. Jordan had always been the kind of man who handled everything without complaints, so I never paid much attention when he first mentioned that business was slowing down. It was just a passing comment, something he said while rubbing his temples, looking at his laptop like he was trying to solve a puzzle that wouldn't fit together. He had been working longer hours, coming home later than usual, more exhausted than ever. But at first, I didn't think much of it. I had heard him stress about work before, about contracts and clients and deals that almost didn't go through but eventually did. I assumed this was just one of those times, another bump in the road that he would fix the way he always did. But then the first late bill came in. I saw the red stamped envelope sitting on the kitchen counter one morning, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Concern. I asked Jordan about it later that night, and he brushed it off, saying he would take care of it soon. He looked tired, more tired than I had ever seen him before, but I ignored it. I figured he was just overthinking things. The next month, more bills came. The car payment was overdue. The housekeeper didn't show up one morning because her payment hadn't been processed. Jordan told me she had been let go. I couldn't believe it. I had never even considered the idea of not having a housekeeper. That was when he finally told me that his biggest client had pulled out of a contract, and it was affecting everything. He said he was working on it, but things were going to be tight for a while. I didn't understand what he meant by tight. I thought he meant he needed to move some things around, maybe delay a few payments, but that eventually everything would be fine. But soon I started to notice more changes. Jordan was cutting back on things I had never thought twice about. He canceled our Friday date nights. He stopped taking his car for detailing. He started bringing lunch from home instead of ordering food. Then the credit card started declining. I remember the first time it happened, I was out shopping with my friends. I had a few dresses in my cart, nothing extravagant, just things I needed to add to my collection. But at checkout, my card didn't go through. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I told the cashier to run it again, but she gave me that annoying look people give when they think you can't afford something. One of my friends stepped in, saying she would cover it, and I laughed it off, making up some excuse about Jordan changing the card limits for security reasons. I had never been so humiliated. When I got home that night, I asked Jordan what was going on, and that was when he finally sat me down and told me the truth. He said things were worse than he had let on. He had been trying to fix it, but the business was failing faster than he could recover it. He told me he needed me to cut back on spending. I remember staring at him, trying to process what he had just said. I had never heard those words come out of his mouth before. Cut back? On what? I told him I wasn't spending on useless things. Everything I bought was necessary. He told me that right now we couldn't afford necessities like that anymore. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him how the hell he had let it get this bad. Instead, I asked him how long this tight phase was going to last. He sighed and told me to be patient. Be patient? What exactly was I supposed to be patient for? To sit around and watch my life crumble? To let all the things I had built for myself, the comfort, the luxury, the ease, just disappear? I told him I didn't sign up for this. He didn't say anything, just rubbed his face with his hands and said he was doing everything he could. That was when I started resenting him. I know how that sounds, and I know people will judge me for it. But what else was I supposed to feel? The man I had married was someone who took care of things, who made sure I never had to worry about anything. Now he was telling me to adjust, like I was supposed to just accept this new life of budgeting and limitations. I couldn't stand it. The more he struggled, the less attracted to him I became. He stopped looking like the strong, capable man I had married. Now all I saw was a tired, defeated version of the man I once knew. He wasn't impressive anymore. He was just there. I still went out with my friends, but now I was the broke one in the group. They noticed? They noticed when I stopped buying drinks for the table, when I stopped booking trips with them, when I hesitated before ordering at restaurants. It wasn't long before they started asking questions. I told them the truth. That Jordan's business was falling apart and that he was trying to drag me down with him. They all gave me the same sympathetic yet amused look, like they had seen this story before. They didn't say much at first, but one of them pulled me aside after dinner one night and told me I should start thinking about my future. She told me I was too young and too beautiful to be wasting my life struggling. She said I should consider my options. I knew what she meant. I knew she wasn't talking about getting a job. She was talking about what the other women in our circle did when their husbands started slipping. They found other men who didn't hesitate when it came to spending money, men who wanted to spoil women like me because they could. I pretended I wasn't considering it. I told myself I was just listening, not actually planning anything. But the truth was, the more I looked at Jordan, stressed, struggling, barely holding things together, the more I realized I was wasting my time. I deserved more, I deserved better. And if Jordan wasn't going to provide for me anymore, then maybe someone else would. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped caring. Maybe it was the day I realized Jordan would never fix things. Or maybe it was the first time I felt the rush of being desired again, of being treated like a woman should be treated. At first it started off as casual conversations. Just drinks, dinner, harmless fun. Nothing serious. Nothing that could actually be considered cheating. At least that's what I told myself. The first man was a businessman I met at a high-end restaurant while I was out with my friends. He was older, mid-40s, the type of man who wore wealth like a second skin. Expensive suit? Watch that, probably cost more than a year of rent. A confident smile that said he had never been told no in his life. He approached me like he already knew the answer, and honestly, I didn't even try to resist. The conversation flowed easily. He asked about my life, and I told him the version of the truth that made me sound interesting. I didn't tell him I was married to a man who was barely scraping by. Instead, I played the role of the neglected wife. The woman who had once had everything but was now struggling because her husband had failed her, and he ate it up. That night, he paid for everything. My drinks, my friends' drinks, the entire bill. He even slipped me money as I was leaving, telling me to get myself something nice. It was the first time in months I'd held that much cash in my hands. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt something. But instead, I felt powerful. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. It was just money. It wasn't like I was sleeping with him. Yet. The second man was a politician, someone I met through mutual acquaintances. He was married, of course, but that didn't stop him from being generous. He took me to expensive hotels, where we would have dinners overlooking the city. He made me feel like a queen, buying me jewelry, designer shoes, perfumes I had only ever seen in magazines. The third man, and the most dangerous of them all, was a high-level executive who didn't ask questions. He flew me out to Dubai for a weekend getaway. He made sure everything was first class. The flight, the hotel, the shopping. He treated me like I was his personal indulgence, something he could show off and spoil. And I let him. I allowed him to touch me in ways that I never allowed Jordan to. I told myself I didn't mind that he treated me like a sex toy in the bedroom so long my skin shone from the luxury things he got me in the morning. I told myself I didn't mind that he was using me for his pleasure like some kept girl. All I thought about were the gifts that came afterwards. I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I deserved this. Jordan had let me down. He had failed me. He had promised me a life of stability and ease, and he had taken that away without my permission. Why should I suffer for his failures? I had spent years being the perfect wife, never complaining, never asking for more than what he could give me. Now that he couldn't give me anything, was I supposed to just sit and accept it? I refused to be like those women who stayed loyal to broken men out of pity. A man's job was to provide. That was the natural order of things. And if Jordan couldn't do that anymore, then I had every right to find men who could. I convinced myself that Jordan would have done the same if the roles were reversed. I told myself that I was just securing my future. I made excuses for every lie, every late night, every moment I sneaked away to answer a call or reply to a text. I wasn't a bad person. I was just doing what I had to do. Jordan had no idea. He was too busy drowning in his own mess, working late nights, running around trying to fix something that was already broken. He came home exhausted, smelling like stress and failure. I stopped waiting up for him. I stopped asking how his day was. Because, in my mind, it didn't matter anymore. I had other options now. I didn't need to hear about his struggles when I had just spent the day wrapped in silk sheets, sipping champagne on a private jet. I stopped caring about his sacrifices. His late nights at work? Not my problem. His stress over bills? That was his job. His exhaustion? He brought it on himself. Meanwhile, I was being treated like the woman I was meant to be. I had no reason to feel guilty. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I didn't realize, not yet, that everything was about to come crashing down. That soon I wouldn't have anything left. Not my lovers, not my money, not my marriage. Nothing. But at the time, I was too blinded by greed to see what was coming. Looking back, I don't know why I was so careless that night. Maybe it was because I was so used to Jordan not paying attention anymore. Or maybe it was because, in my mind, I had already moved on from him. He just didn't know it yet. It was late, and I had just gotten home from a girls' night out, or at least that was the excuse I'd given Jordan. He never asked for details anymore. He barely looked at me these days, and honestly, I preferred it that way. The last thing I needed was to feel guilty when I had nothing to feel guilty about. I left my phone on the couch and headed to the bathroom to take a long shower. I had spent the night in a VIP lounge with one of my lovers, sipping champagne while he talked about some business deal I didn't care about. The only thing that had mattered to me was that before I left, he had slipped a black Amex card into my bag and told me to treat myself. I had been in a good mood, already planning my next vacation, already picturing myself lying on a yacht in Dubai when I stepped under the hot water. I had no idea what was waiting for me when I came out. When I walked back into the living room, the air felt different. Jordan was sitting on the couch, my phone in his hands. His face was unreadable, but there was something off about him, something cold. For a split second, my heart stopped. Then I saw the screen was still lit up, and I knew. The message was there, blazing bright for him to see. Can't wait to see you in Dubai next week. Tell your husband to keep struggling while I take care of you like a real man should. I froze. I had gotten away with so much, so many secrets, so many lies. And yet, all it took was one message. Jordan stared at me for what felt like forever. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there holding my phone like it disgusted him, like I disgusted him. I crossed my arms and told myself to stay calm. There was no point in panicking. Jordan had seen something he wasn't supposed to see, but so what? It wasn't like I was the villain here. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, empty, almost too calm. He wanted an explanation. And that was when something inside me snapped. I could have lied. I could have cried, begged, denied everything, pretended it was some random prank message and made up a story to cover my tracks. But I didn't. I laughed. I don't even know why I did it. Maybe it was the nerves, or maybe I was just tired of pretending. But the second I laughed, I saw something in Jordan's face break. I told him that he was acting surprised for no reason. What did he expect? Did he really think I was going to sit around suffering while he worked things out like some desperate, loyal housewife? I reminded him that this was his fault, not mine. That if he had been a real man, a real provider, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. I wasn't the problem. He was. I told him that money is what keeps women happy. Love wasn't enough, and the moment he had stopped providing, he had stopped being useful. I expected him to argue. I expected him to explode. I expected him to beg me to stay. But he just sat there. For the first time in my life, Jordan was speechless. And for some reason, that infuriated me. I wanted him to fight for me. I wanted him to prove that I was worth chasing, worth fixing things for. So I pushed harder. I looked him dead in the eye and told him to his face, "Provide for me, or I'm leaving." And then I waited. I waited for the pleading. I waited for the promises. I waited for him to say, "I'll fix this. Don't leave. I'll fix this." But instead, he smirked, a slow, almost mocking smirk. Then he stood up, put my phone down on the table, and walked to the bedroom. I stood there confused, still expecting him to say something, to do something. And then I heard the sound of a suitcase being unzipped. I walked into the bedroom, still not understanding what was happening. Jordan was packing, folding his clothes calmly, methodically, like he was going on a trip. I asked him what he was doing. He didn't even look at me when he said he was leaving. I laughed again, but this time it was a nervous laugh and forced. I told him to stop being dramatic, to sit down and talk about this like adults. He just kept packing. He grabbed his watch, his wallet, his passport. And then, for the first time since I had stepped out of that shower, he looked at me, and I saw it. Not anger, not hurt, not betrayal, just indifference. Like he was done. Like he had already left me out of his mind. That was when I panicked. I asked him where the hell he thought he was going. He just shrugged and told me it didn't matter. I told him to stop acting stupid, but he just zipped up his bag, grabbed his keys, and walked past me. I followed him to the door, waiting for him to change his mind, waiting for him to turn around and fight for this marriage. But he didn't. He just opened the door, stepped out, and closed it behind him. And then he was gone. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the door, waiting for it to open again, waiting for him to come back, waiting for him to do what I thought all men did when they realized their wives were slipping away. Beg. But Jordan didn't beg. He didn't yell. He didn't even try to stop me. He just left. And for the first time since all of this had started, for the first time since I had made the choice to find better options, I felt afraid. I had won the argument. So why did it feel like I had just lost everything? I should have felt devastated when Jordan walked out that night. I should have been pacing the apartment, crying, panicking, calling him nonstop, begging him to come back. But I didn't. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and smirked at the silence. Finally, no more guilt. No more tiptoeing around Jordan's financial failures. No more pretending to be understanding while he wasted away, working himself to death for nothing. I was free now. For the first time in months, I felt light, unbothered, relieved. Let him go. Good riddance. I told myself that this was the life I wanted. This was my opportunity to finally live the way I was supposed to. Jordan had been a dead weight, a burden holding me back from real happiness. I texted one of my lovers that night, telling him I was finally free. His reply was short. Oh, that's fast. Congrats. It wasn't the enthusiastic reaction I had expected, but I figured he was just busy. He was always traveling, always dealing with business. I didn't overthink it. Instead, I spent the rest of the night fantasizing about my future. I pictured myself moving into a penthouse, having someone else cover my expenses, being taken care of the way I deserved. The next morning, I booked a salon appointment and treated myself to a full makeover. New hair, new nails, new everything. When I walked out, I felt powerful, reborn. I was ready for my new life. But my new life never came. It started with the first man. The businessman who had first spoiled me, the one who had always told me I was too good for my husband, the one who had slipped me thousands in cash like it was nothing. I sent him a message, casually dropping hints that I needed a place to stay for a while. He didn't reply. I waited a few hours and sent another. Still nothing. By nightfall, I called him. It rang once, then straight to voicemail. Confused, I checked our last conversation, and then I saw it. He had blocked me. I refused to panic. One man was nothing. I had others. I reached out to the politician, the one who had promised me a future, connections, stability. He answered after a few rings, his tone casual but distant. I told him I was finally single, that we could finally be together properly, that I was ready for something serious. He was silent for a second before he let out a short laugh and told me that he never agreed to anything like that. He said he had always enjoyed my company, but I had misunderstood the situation. I told him I wasn't asking for marriage, just a little help. A place to stay, something temporary. He sighed and told me that he had to be careful, that now that I wasn't married, I was a liability. I tried to argue, but he hung up before I could finish my sentence. I called back, straight to voicemail. That was when the first wave of fear hit me. I told myself not to panic. There were others. There was one last man, the one who had always promised me the world, the one who had been planning to fly me to Dubai. Surely he would take me in. He was the one who had treated me like a queen, who had told me I was too valuable to waste on a struggling man. I sent him a message, confident that he would be excited to finally have me all to himself. It was delivered. I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Then 4. Nothing. I called. It rang. And then a text popped up. A single message. You think I want to wife a woman who left her own husband when he was struggling? You're fun, but not worth keeping. I stared at the words for so long that the screen went dark. I blinked. Opened the chat again, expecting, I don't know, an apology? A joke? But there was nothing else. Just that one sentence. And then I watched in real time as his profile picture disappeared. Blocked. Just like that. I was worthless to them now. Not a desirable mistress, not a valuable prize, not a kept woman, just another abandoned wife. And suddenly the silence of my apartment was suffocating. For the first time since Jordan had walked out, I realized how quiet the place had become. No sound of him moving around. No late-night typing from his laptop. No murmured phone calls as he tried to fix everything while I ignored him. Nothing. Just me. Alone. The fear that had started as a whisper in my mind was now screaming. I had lost everything. Not just Jordan. Not just the money. But every option I thought I had. And the worst part? There was no one left to blame but myself. Update. I never thought it would get this bad. For the first few days after Jordan left, I had still been delusional enough to believe everything would work out, that one of my lovers would change his mind, or that someone else would come along and save me. I kept up appearances at first. I still went out with my friends, still pretended nothing had changed, but it didn't take long before they started noticing. I stopped picking up the check at brunch. I stopped wearing new outfits every time we met up. I stopped getting my nails done at first, just postponing appointments, then canceling them altogether. And then the worst part happened. I ran out of money. I had never run out of money before. I had always assumed there would be another transfer, another cash gift, another credit card loaded and ready to be used, but suddenly there was nothing. The rent was due, the bills were piling up, and for the first time in my life, I had no backup plan. I tried reaching out to my so-called friends, but they all suddenly became busy. The same women who used to beg me to come out, who admired my life, who once envied my luxury, now wouldn't even return my calls. I showed up to brunch one day without a fresh manicure, wearing an outfit I had worn before, and the way they looked at me said everything. I wasn't one of them anymore. I wasn't valuable. I wasn't someone worth keeping around. The invitation stopped coming. I was officially alone. And that's when I realized I needed a job. The thought of working had never even crossed my mind before. Not once. But now I was staring at overdue bills, a landlord who was losing patience, and a fridge that was empty except for expired yogurt and a bottle of wine. I tried applying for jobs, and that's when the real humiliation started. I had nothing to put on a resume. No experience, no skills, no references. What was I supposed to say? That I had spent years being pretty and living off a man's money? That my skill set included brunching and online shopping? I lied on a few applications, saying I had worked as a personal assistant, but the moment they asked for details, I was exposed. I tried applying to retail jobs, thinking I could at least do something simple, but I was too slow, too inexperienced, too unfamiliar with actual work. No one wanted to hire a woman in her late 20s with zero work history. For the first time in my life, I was useless. And while I was spiraling, drowning, suffocating in my own mistakes, Jordan was thriving. I didn't know at first because I was too ashamed to reach out, but one day I was scrolling on social media and there he was, smiling. Happy. A new place, a new car, a new life. It had only been a few months and he had completely rebuilt everything. He had cut me out of his life like I never existed, and it was working for him. And the worst part? He had moved on. I saw a picture of him at a charity gala, standing next to a woman. She was younger, simpler, prettier, in an effortless way, and she was holding his hand. Something inside me snapped. I texted him, called him, emailed him. He never answered. I told myself he just needed time, that he would come back around, but deep down, I knew. I had thrown away a good man for a fantasy that never existed. Update. Hello Reddits, it's me again. This is sadly my last post here. It's been a year and 3 weeks now since Jordan walked out on me. I honestly never imagined my life would end up like this. If someone had told me a year ago that I would be broke, abandoned, and desperate, I would have laughed in their face. But now there was nothing left to laugh about. I lost the apartment. The landlord had no patience for excuses, and when I couldn't come up with rent, I was forced to leave. No friends offered me a place to stay. No lovers returned my calls. I ended up in a tiny, run-down studio apartment, the kind I used to scoff at, the kind I had once sworn I would never live in. The floors creaked, the walls were stained, and the neighbors blast music at all hours of the night. I had no money, no job, and no way out, and the worst part? I had done this to myself. One day, I was at a grocery store counting coins to pay for instant noodles and a cheap bottle of wine when I saw them, Jordan and her, the new woman, the one who replaced me. She was laughing at something he said, her arm linked with his, looking up at him like he had hung the moon. And the way he looked back at her, he had never looked at me that way, not even when things were good. I turned away before they could see me. I didn't want him to see what I had become. I didn't want him to pity me. That night, I went back to my empty apartment and did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not because I had lost money, not because I had lost comfort, but because, for the first time, I understood real loss. I had lost Jordan. I had lost the only person who had ever truly cared about me. I picked up my phone, scrolling through old pictures. Vacations. Date nights. Moments I had once taken for granted. I kept scrolling. Back to our wedding photo. I looked at my own face, smiling, radiant, happy. A woman who had everything. A woman who thought she was too good for the man she married. A woman who had no idea what was coming. I stared at that photo for a long time, and then I did something I never thought I would do. I deleted it, because there was no point holding on to something that could never be mine again. I had lost him. I had lost everything, and now I had to live with that.